At 1826 local time, on Qeshm Island's southern coast, an Iranian missile crew is finishing a firing solution on an oil tanker crossing the Strait of Hormuz, the same drill that lit 2 holes on fire in these lanes last week. What the crew doesn't know is that 2 American destroyers southeast of the strait already locked onto them. The forward deck of the lead destroyer erupts, a solid booster punching the first round straight up through its own steam. 4 seconds and then the handoff. The booster detaches, wings snapping out of the fuselage, a scoop folding down under the belly as the weapon pitches over toward the swells and catches itself low. Ugly for a heartbeat, then perfect. Behind it, the second is climbing. A third screams out before the smoke thins, and 2 miles off the beam, the other destroyer empties her cells inside the same minute. Below decks, the launch crew feel each ignition through the plates a half beat before the roar catches up. Thump, thunder, again. What makes this possible is the Mark 41 vertical launching system. 96 cells under that forward deck and the fantail. 32 and 64, and every round that just left came up through its own armored hatch on a motor that lit inside the ship. Called a hot launch, which means the hull swallows the entire booster exhaust at point-blank range, a flame that would gut a compartment borne 3 feet from the next loaded round, and the deck doesn't even scorch, because the MK-41 isn't 96 separate holes. It's modules of 8 built around one armored chimney. And if you look here at the wider hatch in the middle of each grid, that's where the fire goes, up and out, while the missile takes the door beside it. 12 rounds, 90 seconds. American democracy in action. Both ships turn southeast and open the distance. Nobody cheers. The Navy doesn't need a celebration when the receipt is already printing. 174 miles northwest, under the camouflage netting above Masan, another crew is deep in a countdown of its own. The Gadir battery has the tanker, core speed, a firing solution a few keystrokes from complete, and the request for launch clearance is already climbing the wire toward Bandar Abbas. On Sunday, the word took most of half an hour to come back. It came back, yes. Out in the lanes, 40,000 tons of somebody's crude steams into the box at 12 knots, and the crew chief watches her through the haze the way a toll booth watches traffic. 2 clocks are now running on the same patch of water. The Iranians are racing a signature in Bandar Abbas. What's racing them hasn't cleared the horizon yet. On the bridge wing, a lookout holds the lead round in his binoculars until it slips into a trough between swells and doesn't come back out. That was a handoff between 2 engines. The booster rocket is a sprinter, enormous shove, finished in 6 seconds. From there, it's the small turbofan behind the belly scoop, sipping jet fuel, holding 550 miles an hour for as long as the tanks allow. What's left flying is 18 feet of airframe, 20 inches across, with 1,000 pounds of blast fragmentation warhead riding up front. The rocket is the man who shoves the bobsled. Everything after the push is the turbofan. Endurance is the number everyone quotes, sure. This afternoon, the number that matters is altitude. On the ridge above Masan, the coastal surveillance crew works 50 miles of empty water, July haze pressing the horizon down to a gray smear. 4 days of American strikes have crawled up the coast toward them. Nobody up here has slept all week, and the emptiness on the scan is starting to feel less like safety and more like a held breath. 15 minutes out, the reason that scope stays clean isn't the haze, it's the shape of the planet. Radar leaves a dish in a straight line while the Earth curves away underneath it. So anything at 100 feet stays tucked behind the bulge of the world until it's 25 miles from his antenna. At Tomahawk speed, that's 2.5 minutes of warning. And those minutes aren't a reward for 4 days of vigilance. They're what's left when the planet runs out of places to hide his enemy. And the water is running a con of its own. A radar pointed at something skimming the surface gets 2 echoes back, the weapon and its reflection off the sea. And a tracker that can't separate them aims at a point between the target and the waves. Add every swell in the beam throwing back noise, and the missile becomes a small, hard thing buried in moving clutter. It's why 100 feet is the design altitude, and why sea skimmers have humiliated navies since the Falklands. Try shooting a bird by aiming at its reflection in a pond. Now put chop on the pond. The ridge can't see them, and the sea keeps refusing to give them up. What they can be is aimed, and that happened hours ago. At the 12-minute mark, the 10 flatten into a loose line for Qeshm's southern coast, and 2 peel away west onto a longer route and dissolve into the haze. Remember those 2. A Tomahawk gets driven to its target. The route plotted turn by turn before launch, threaded around every defense anybody knows about. In the last miles, it looks down through a nose camera and matches what it sees against pictures loaded before it ever left the rail. Facial recognition for buildings. 10 rounds take 19 minutes because the coast sits 174 miles away, Detroit to Cleveland, covered at the speed of a regional jet. 2 take longer on purpose. This weapon doesn't fall on an address, it drives to one, and the planners pick the streets. On the hillside, the netting over the launcher is squared away because these men are good at this. Dug in, dispersed, more than 100 miles of open water between them and the nearest American ship. Distance, they believe, is protection. 19 minutes for the 10. The 2 on the long route have a different problem, because in the lead destroyer's Combat Information Center, a photograph from this morning's reconnaissance pass has just landed, and the berms outside Susa are empty. Back on the hillside, the Masan crew looks at the solution. The ridge feeds down the track, and on the truck, the box launcher swings onto the bearing and stops. Everything ready. All of it waiting on Bandar Abbas saying the word. That's how it went on Sunday and again on Monday. And both times, a merchant crew in the lane spent the afternoon fighting a fire. If you look here at the 4 boxes angled off the back of that truck, you'll see a Ghadir anti-ship battery. And the trunk doesn't find anything. It pulls a trigger, the radar on the ridge finds the ship and hands down 4 numbers, and the missile flies inertially toward where those numbers put the hull in 6 minutes, not where it sits. Its own seeker wakes in the last few miles, drops to wavetop height, and punches 60 pounds of warhead through plating built to keep out weather. Ghadir is Iran's stretched development of the Noor, itself a copy of the Chinese Charlie 802, 1,500 pounds of high subsonic missile with reach Tehran claims past 190 miles. From this hillside, a fraction of that number covers every lane in the strait. The battery is a gun in a toll booth. The toll booth never chases anybody, the traffic comes to it. And the U.S. Navy has kept these lanes toll-free since 1988. A tanker's first warning is a missile already inside a minute of arriving. In 3 minutes, this crew learns what it feels like from the other end. 2.5 minutes out, the first returns clear the horizon, and phones start ringing across the island all at once, the way they do when several men see the same thing in the same second. On the hillside, a sergeant grabs the field phone. The line to the ridge is already busy. 2.5 minutes sounds survivable until you price out what a battery physically does inside of it. A search radar builds a track before it hands anybody a solution. A launcher has to be cued and slewed and spun up from coal. And crews have to be in seats instead of beside trucks with a cigarette. None of it fits inside 150 seconds. A fire drill where the alarm gives you the length of one song, and everything else out here is a spectator. Exactly 1 weapon on Qeshm is manned, loaded, and pointed at the water. It's also the oldest thing here. Near the mast, a gunner gets the shout, and the slit trench is 10 steps behind him. He knows what a low, fast contact off the water means, and he straps into the seat anyway, cranks the twin mount around on its ring, leads the shape skimming in off the swells, and opens up. The mount hammers his shoulders hard enough to blur the sight picture. He walks the stream. Tracers arc out over the strait in one long, bright rope, bending toward the lead round as it crosses left to right below the ridge. Spent casings pour off the mount and ring off the rock. And the man beside him keeps feeding belts because neither of them has anywhere better to be. ZU-23-2, Soviet, designed in 1960. 2 wheels, iron sights, and a man's judgment. 66 years old, towed behind a truck, and the only weapon on this island that showed up for work. Under him, the pair of barrels throws 23mm shells at 3,200 feet per second, 2,000 rounds a minute, out to about 1.5 miles. Respectable numbers against a helicopter. Against a Tomahawk, the arithmetic is a horror show. The missile crosses at 800 feet per second, so at 1 mile out, his shells need more than 1.5 seconds to arrive. In 1.5 seconds, the target moves a full 1/4 mile. He isn't shooting at the missile. He's shooting at a guess, a patch of empty sky judged by eye, into haze against a crossing target, throwing a ball to a receiver at a flat sprint from the far end of the football field. The tracer stream bends behind the missile and stays there. Competent gunner, impossible arithmetic. He had to touch it. Hold that thought, because in 7 minutes, 1 more crew proves it never had to. 90 seconds later, the hillside stops existing in stages. A round he never saw tears the lattice mast off the ridge, and the rest hammer Masan seconds apart. one through the launcher vehicles, another through the reload site, where the Ghadir's own boosters start lighting one another off in flat, cracking secondaries. A third through the command van, and this is why nobody brought a bunker buster. Nothing at Masan is a bunker. What's standing on this hillside is sheet metal, canvas, a lattice tower, and rubber tires. A 1,000-pound blast fragmentation warhead doesn't punch through things. It throws steel outward at anything soft standing nearby. And a missile battery is almost entirely soft. Launcher hydraulics, cable runs, a radar's feed horn. You don't take a sledgehammer to a window. The reload site handles the rest of the job for free. Explosions roll across the water to Bandar Abbas, where people stop on the street and check their watches. 6:45, 10 addresses down, and Iran's premier coastal defense complex now has the military value of a Buc-ee's parking lot. Out on the lanes, the tracker that spent this afternoon inside a firing solution holds course at 12 knots, and her master never learns why nobody shot. The 2 rounds still flying are aimed at a place where nobody's standing. Tire tracks run out through the gap in the earth walls at Susa and vanish onto asphalt. Hours after the morning reconnaissance pass, that crew folded the mast, started the engines, and drove away. Shoot and scoot, the oldest trick in the missile business, run by men who wrote a few pages of the book. Somewhere on 576 square miles, 5 trucks sit undercover, radio silent, radar cold. A fixed site is a coordinate forever. A mobile battery outruns its own coordinates in the time it takes to drop a mast and start an engine. Every reconnaissance photograph of a mobile launcher describes the past. The entire targeting problem is the gap between shutter and warhead. And this morning's picture is 6 hours stale, aiming at where somebody stood when you took the photo. 2 rounds, $4 million, 10 minutes from cratering a vacant lot. And the only thing that can beat that clock has been holding an orbit over the strait since noon, parked inside the engagement envelope of the exact system it's hunting. 10 minutes left on the clock, and coordinates come down through the satellite link. 5 trucks tucked into a date grove near Ramkan in the island's flat center. They weren't there this morning. If you look up here at the wings on the aircraft that found them, longer than the 737s, that's an MQ-4C Triton, the maritime cousin of the Global Hawk. It cruises above 50,000 feet at a patient 330 knots and stays up more than a day at a stretch. The ANZPY-3 radar in its belly sweeps a full circle around the aircraft, better than 2.5 million square miles of ocean and coastline in 24 hours, 80% of the lower 48 every single day. And the point isn't resolution. The point is that it never leaves. A satellite checks the front gate every few hours, but the Triton is the guard who walks the same hallway all day and notices the chair that moved. That orbit has a price, and the crew knows the number. The Triton has been holding station inside the reach of the exact weapon it's hunting, and everyone in this Navy knows exactly what that costs. In June of 2019, one of these batteries reached up and tore an RQ-48 Global Hawk out of the sky over this same strait. A surveillance aircraft worth north of $100 million, still the most expensive drone loss in American history. The crew flying this one sit in a ground station half a world away, and they hold the orbit anyway. Somebody has to be there the moment those trucks turn a wheel. Tehran built a museum exhibit out of that Global Hawk's wreckage, and the Navy's answer was to hang another orbit right over it. It watched them move, then it saw where they parked, and how they parked is what finished them. Looking at the spacing between those 5 trucks, not the trucks, the spacing. A surface-to-air battery can't park like a truck stop. The radar vehicle needs clear sky on its arcs. Launchers need separation so one hit doesn't take the others with it, and it all sits close enough to run cable and stay inside the radar's control. That produces a geometry, the same in Iran as it is anywhere on Earth, because the physics that sets it is the same everywhere. Trees hide vehicles. Nothing hides the shape they have to be parked in. And the analysts weren't hunting trucks. They were hunting that shape in a place it had no business being. You can hide the cars. The parking lot gives you away. In the grove, nobody's looking up. This crew played it perfectly for 4 days, and the thing that betrays them is the one thing doctrine made them do. Coordinates go up to a satellite, down to the destroyer, and back up again. Address this time to 2 weapons already on the wing. Over the water, both Tomahawks bank hard at the same moment and steady on Ramkan. The hardware behind that change of mind is a shallow hump along each missile's spine, a two-way satellite antenna, and most of the reason this version is called Block V. Older Tomahawks flew the route they were loaded with. Once they left the ship, nothing on Earth changed their minds. Block V keeps a line home for the full flight. Hold it circling offshore, swing it onto any of 15 alternates, or hand it coordinates it's never heard of. A human on the loop from launch to impact. The missile flies itself. A sailor decides where it lands. The window doesn't stay open forever, and the thing that closes it isn't the data link, it's fuel. Every mid-course turn costs range. A route plan for Sousa only banks so much margin. And somewhere on the strike officer's plot, there's a line. Cross it and no coordinate on Earth brings these 2 rounds to Ramkan, because the math stops permitting it. The old Tomahawk was a mailed letter, sure. Sealed at launch, delivered as addressed. This one is a driver you can call while he's on the road, right up until he hasn't got the gas to turn around. And the line is 4 minutes away. Both routes replot inside it. One runs short and direct, straight in off the water. The other gets forced long. The only fuel-feasible line to Ramkan crosses the coast well to the east and comes over the island itself. Nobody chose that for the surprise value. The fuel chose it. In the grove, the commander feels Masan before he hears it, the shock arriving through his boots a beat ahead of the sound, like a door slammed in the next building. Needs no report to give the order every mobile air defense commander gives when the strikes start landing. Radar up, short bursts only. A few seconds of transmission, then silence. Then another burst and silence again. Blinking instead of staring. Because a radar transmitting is a radar broadcasting where it's parked, and the Americans are always listening. On the third blink, he catches something, a small return. Very low, 24 miles out, coming in fast off the water. A canister blasts open on the radar truck. The missile leaps off the rail on a pillar of orange fire, arcs over the palms, and streaks for the coast at 4 times the speed of sound. Third Cordad, and the round it just threw is a Sayyad 2, the sharpest system Iran builds at home, and the only battery on this island that just did everything right. The round it fired carries its own radar in the nose, which sounds like a fire and forget and isn't, because that seeker is small. It wakes in the last few miles and sees a narrow cone of sky, nothing more. Handed a basket the size of a county and it comes home empty. Against a sea skimmer buried in the same clutter that beat the coastal radar an hour ago, the basket has to be tight, and tight costs something. The battery's own array holding the track, updating the missile through every second of mid-course, staring at the water while the whole island burns behind it. The seeker is a flashlight that switches on at the end of the street. Somebody still has to drive it to the right neighborhood, and the driver can't look anywhere else while he does. Steering has a bill attached, and it comes due in 90 seconds. The Sayyad covers 20 miles in under half a minute, 46 miles of reach, a ceiling near 88,000 feet, roughly Mach 4. Off the coast, its proximity fuse does the thing the gunner on the ridge could never do. It doesn't touch anything. It reads the closing geometry, blooms its fragment pattern across the missile's path, and the seaward Tomahawk comes apart over the water in a long spray of burning fuel. The gunner needed contact. This needed proximity. In the grove, the crew allows itself one cheer. First-rate work against one of the hardest targets in the world, and it cost him 90 seconds of continuous transmission against a second Tomahawk that left his map 5 minutes ago. That antenna is still pointed out to sea. It has to be. He stared seaward for 90 seconds to guide the shot, and the array is now hunting a second sea skimmer that isn't coming from the sea. The other round crossed the coast to the east and is driving across Qeshm itself, low over rooftops, ridge lines, and date palms, buried in ground clutter. The harsh of echoes a radar gets back off everything that isn't sky. Over water, a low target is hard. Inland, it's a needle in a haystack. If that antenna swings inland and catches it even 60 seconds out, he gets another Sayyad into the air, and this duel goes the other way. It doesn't swing. 60 seconds out, the last Tomahawk comes over the low ridge east of Ramkan, 32 minutes after the first booster lit in the Gulf of Oman. Its 1,000-pound warhead tears the third Cordad's array apart where it stands. The fireball climbs through the palms and folds over on itself, orange to black. Launch trucks rock on their suspensions. Smoldering fronds rain into the clearing while the men who were cheering 5 minutes ago get their heads down between the wheels. Here's what that warhead just bought. A battery like this is a chain. Several trucks that launch and one truck that sees and thinks. Destroy the launchers and Tehran replaces steel. Take the truck that sees, and every Sayyad still sitting in its tube becomes exactly what it looks like: a telephone pole in a box. One hit didn't erase the battery, it blinded it. Same result, fraction of the effort. Smoke drifts west over Ramkan. In the grove, 2 launcher trucks sit untouched, tubes loaded, crews unhurt, and nothing left on this island can tell those missiles where to go. The trucks can hide again tomorrow. What they're hiding from doesn't land. If you enjoyed this video, watch the US Navy turn Iran's Navy into the Gulf's newest artificial reef. Bye for now.